This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Today on CityCast Boise. The sentencing and shocking document release in the Brian Kohberger case left the victims' families and survivors grasping for closure. Meanwhile, RFK Jr. visited Boise praising what he called medical freedom while facing protests and restricting press questions. And Jaialdi is bringing people together in celebration and community. It's Friday, July 25th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Happy Friday once again, everyone. And joining me this week is KTVB's own Brian Holmes. Thanks so much for being here today, Brian.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, before we dive into the headlines, I've got a sneak peek just for our listeners. We're launching something brand new on Monday, CityCast Boise Neighbors. It's our new membership program for people who love Boise and want to get even more from CityCast Boise. If you're one of the many people who relies on us for staying connected to this city, now's your chance to support our work and make a huge difference. The official rollout is happening on Monday, and we're aiming for 40 founding members by next Friday. CityCast Boise Neighbors will be getting some pretty great perks that I'll explain more next week, but in addition, I'll write a custom haiku for the very first person who joins. If you want to beat the crowd, go to membership.citycast.fm to join now and keep the stories coming. Okay, Brian, let's get into today's headlines. This week, the headlines were just plastered with the Kohberger story. And this week, it all kind of came to fruition when Kohberger was offered a plea deal, pled guilty, and was sentenced on Wednesday. And Brian, you've been following this trial and really focusing on this week. So what was it like to finally watch the plea deal happen, watch the sentencing happen after all of these years?
Well, to begin with, it was very emotional in that courtroom this week. Families, friends of the victims came in to read their victim statements prior to the judge sentencing Brian Kohberger to his life sentence. 4 consecutive life sentences is what he got, plus 10 years for the burglary charge. So all 5 charges. That was pretty much a given. That was no surprise. What we did learn post-hearing was how we got to this point a little bit from the prosecutor, that back in June, after the defense had exhausted all of their attempts to kind of derail this trial, whether it was the autism claim or a separate perpetrator, like this could have been done by somebody else, when the judge said, no, we're not going to go that way. The prosecutor said that they were approached by the defense with a plea deal. And the prosecutor, Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson, said, I will only accept that if he will admit and plead guilty to all 4 charges, all 4 first-degree murder charges. Now, the only thing that this did was remove the death penalty, the option of that. And they said that they sent out a letter to the families asking their opinion of that before they accepted it. And it all happened over a weekend, basically, about a week's time, a little less than a week. And only one family, he said, was not really in favor of that, and that was the Gonzalez family. And they've been very vocal about that up to this point. But they knew that this is their best shot. And so the best shot was, when you take a case to trial, there's the opportunity, or option, I should say, possibility of an acquittal or not getting the complete outcome that you wanted. This was the best case scenario that the prosecutor said that they wanted to take. So this was a chance then now for the family members and the friends and even the roommates to speak and say, this is what this crime, this horrendous crime, the effect it had on us. And it came right out of the gates with the roommates. And that was probably the most emotional part. Bethany Funk is one of the roommates. And if you've been following the story, there's been all this social media accusations of why they did not do anything. How did they survive? And even one of them seeing Brian Kohberger leave the house that night, early morning. And that was probably the most emotional one, was from Dylan Mortensen. She was the one that supposedly saw him, looked him in the face basically as he was leaving, and he did nothing and he left. But nobody called 911 until the next morning about noon, because everyone thought, well, is this real? Did this happen? That kind of stuff. So her testimony was emotional from the very beginning. She even sat down, and I heard this from some people who were in the courtroom, that she asked the prosecutor to sit. She asked to sit down in the chair, but asked the prosecutor to turn his body so that she could not see Brian Kohberger.
Wow.
She's been intimidated, and it's been a part of their life ever since November of 2022. She's had panic attacks that she's never had before. But the biggest thing that stuck out to me was that she said, this crime shattered pieces of me that I didn't know could break. That was probably the one that got a lot of people like, this is a big deal. And this kind of really hit hard for a lot of people listening to her.
Absolutely. I know that the testimony that maybe stood out to me, well, the Goncalves testimonies, both the father, Steve Goncalves, and then Olivia, the older sister, both of those were very intense testimonies, which, of course, they lost their daughter, their sister. Yes. Olivia's, I found myself clapping at the end. I mean, she called him a failed rapper. She attacked his eyebrows. She said he was insecure disguised as control. She said he was not profound. He's just pathetic. He was painfully average. And that was the thing that was most scary is he wasn't even like a scary person, just painfully average. She said he was dumb, weak, dirty, sloppy, and finally ended with, you don't matter just because somebody said your name out loud. Like the hits kept coming from her, and you could just feel how much she did not want him to feel like he mattered or he was powerful in this moment. And I thought that was a powerful stand for her to take.
And I think it started with her father. And that gives you an idea of like the difference in these testimonies, whereas Dylan did not want to even look at him or have him in her periphery. Mm-hmm. Steve Gonzalez walked up there and physically turned the podium so he could face him directly and look him in the face and direct his comments directly at him, which he's also said, he's stupid. He called his master's degree a joke, refuses to say his name. And he's, basically said, you picked the wrong family. We're all laughing at you. And Olivia, with her, says, as you said, won't give him the tears that give you power. Called him a sociopath, delusional, and stupid, a pathetic, hypochondriac loser, as you mentioned. It was just broke him down because that's, there's that understandable anger from that family of this is what you took from us and how dare you, and you thought you could outsmart everybody, and your education and you think you're smarter than everybody amounted to nothing at this point.
Brian, can I ask you, during the sentencing, Brian Kohberger declined to speak. He wasn't asked to speak at all. And a lot of times in these cases where there's a plea deal, the person not only has to plead guilty or whatever deal they make, but also explain why or kind of do something that is designed to give these families some kind of closure. This was not required of Kohberger. Do you know why that is?
Well, it's not ever required. You're given the option. And so he gave Judge Hippler gave the defendant the option. And he, as he said, I respectfully decline. And the judge made a point of this, and so did the prosecutor, that even if he could force him to speak and tell us why, there's no guarantee he's going to tell us the truth. And the Judge Hippler was very pointed in his comments also, and I thought this was very interesting that he, the language he used in his speech, saying he slithered into the house. How can we be sure he'll tell us the truth? That even this, his power comes from controlling the narrative, and by letting him do that, he's then taking that away from these families, and he's fine with him not speaking because, in truth, we may never know, what that real reason is. He could come up with something completely off the wall, and we would just have to accept that as his reasoning. And then that would be the narrative going forward. By him not saying anything, the family still own that. And it's not a why. I know it's a lot of dissatisfaction for a lot of people, but just know, as the judge says, he's the worst of the worst. And that's probably all you need to know.
Yeah. Well, and we've seen cases, with other serial killers, other murder cases where we get these off the wall motives. They change the motive years later. So he could have been compelled by the prosecutor, but again, like you said, he could have made up any excuse and then, to frustrate the families or to act like it's a joke. I can understand the frustration though, where you don't know why. That's that question though. Those why questions just haunt you. And so I can understand the families or members of the families or the roommates or friends being so frustrated that you might not ever get an answer to that, even if Kohberger is serving multiple life sentences.
And the investigators commented on this too after the proceedings. They were asked again, what's the connection? And they said they could not find any connection, no motive, no links on social media. That they said that Kohberger did a pretty good job of wiping his software, using a software to wipe his computer, I should say, to kind of eliminate all that stuff. He used VPN a lot. So all of those options were not available to them. And the only thing they could connect him to the house was his car on those cameras, his phone pings, and then, of course, the DoorDash driver that showed up just before to drop off food at just before 4 a.m., like at 3:58, she said, a white Elantra parked behind me as I went to drop off the food. And that's the car that he drove.
Wow. I've often thought, since this has come out and more details have come out, just, you feel terrible for everyone, from the DoorDasher to the dad that was texted a little bit earlier in the night to the friends who were FaceTiming. The ripple effect of this on that community, on so many families, has been so profound. Did it feel like when you were there, when you were hearing these testimonies, does it seem like they are able to move forward, or that this gave them some kind of closure, or is it just one of those wounds that maybe doesn't heal like that?
Kaylee Gonzalez's mom said it at the end. She said, the closure is somewhere out there in the distance. It happens in times, but there's no one thing that says, okay, now it's done. She said, it's going to take some time to process this. Whereas Xana Kernodle's family came out and said they already forgave him. They had forgiven him. She found Jesus. This brought her to Jesus. And so that's her way of dealing with this. And so it's a mixed bag. It depends on the family. It depends on the situation and how they handle it and how they process it. But the Gonzalez family is handling it differently. They were able to tell us some information yesterday that prosecutors told them, and that we're only now learning because they're releasing some of the documents, the investigative documents. There was a little bit of a dump on Wednesday, right after the proceedings, that showed, including the autopsy report, and the Gonzalez family kind of verified this right afterwards, that Kaylee was stabbed more than 20 times.
Oh, my God.
And Xana Kernodle had more than 50 lacerations. And I'm not saying she was stabbed 50 times, but there were 50 cuts to her. And it just, in a matter of like a 10-minute span, you're seeing some of these details that show that this wasn't just like, I'm going to walk in, do my thing quickly and get out. I mean, there was some anger there. There was some attempt to really cause harm. And when that information comes out and you realize to the extent that Bryan Kohberger did this, it really starts to kind of really hit. And you see some of these details. So I think the families are still getting that information, because I do know that some families didn't know all of these details up until yesterday or Wednesday. So it's not something that they can just go, now he's in jail for the rest of his life, we're good with that. There's still going to be these little nuggets that kind of get thrown their way for the next several months.
Well, and with this plea deal, Kohberger avoided the death penalty. And I know that's a controversial topic. And I know different families have said or hinted that they feel differently about that. Did it seem like with the sentencing that felt not satisfactory? I don't think anything can ever be satisfactory, but appropriate for the crime? Or did it seem like people were frustrated the death penalty wasn't on the table still?
Well, that's the thing. The Gonzalez family, they were leaning toward the death penalty. They wanted the 3-point shot. They wanted to go for the big win. Whereas somebody like the Chapin family, they didn't bother to show up this week for these victim statements because they are ready to move on. With a death penalty case, it's a long, drawn-out trial, first of all, plus all of the appeals that go with it. Because, in Idaho, even and across the nation, death row is something that you sit on for decades. 25 years, I believe, is the average. And that goes with appeals. So it's never like a finality it's not like a finality like it's going to happen next year or whatever. It takes a long time. And so they were hoping to avoid having to show up for these appeals, for this long trial, and have to relive this horrendous moment for every single one of those moments.
Was there anything else to close the segment out that really stood out to you, or with the document drop that shines a new light on this case?
That's a good question. I think what stood out to me was, again, with these documents that we're seeing, that Brian Kohberger's demeanor has yet to change. He stared at the victims as they read their statements, looked right at them, did not look away, didn't show much, if any emotion. Obviously didn't show that, but not really much of acknowledgement. He nodded a little bit, but no reaction to what these family members and friends were saying about the lives that he took. And when he was picked up in Pennsylvania, the investigators said the same thing. He was very matter of fact. He was just kind of there, and he answered their questions. And the minute they started asking him about what happened in Moscow, he just very calmly and casually said, "I think I need an attorney." And so it's just been, that's kind of the thing that stood out to me. And I guess maybe that's my lack of knowledge of people who, I guess you would call them a sociopath, how they deal with things is they separate, they're not there. They're just kind of distant. They're in the body, but they're not there, kind of thing. And they can distance themselves and remove themselves. And maybe that's why he was able to do this. And so I guess that's what stood out to me was, in order for a person to commit a crime like this, I guess I'm not shocked, or I shouldn't be shocked, that he can sit in that courtroom and listen to these statements and be unmoved by them.
This episode of CityCast is sponsored by Babbel. Learning a new language opens the door to new friends, new cultures, maybe even a whole new life. So why not start that journey today? You can start speaking a new language with confidence thanks to Babbel's conversation-based technique that quickly teaches you useful words and phrases about the things you actually talk about in the real world. I'm CityCast CEO David Plotz, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel, just one of the 12 languages you can learn with it, including Dutch, French, Italian, which is going to be next for me, Turkish, and Russian. I love the interactive dialogues that Babbel has, which allow me to practice what I've learned right away, and also the speech recognition function, which makes sure I'm getting the pronunciation just right, which honestly, usually I'm not. Also, I love that Babbel's lessons always cover actual things that I talk about in the real world, like food, talking to people I've just met, and also food. Staying motivated to learn a new language has never been easier thanks to real-time feedback, progress trackers, and handy visualizations, in only 10 to 15 minutes a day on Babbel's mobile app or website. So get talking with Babbel. I want you to learn another language, so I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Babbel.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Get lost in the acoustic brilliance of 3D audio that surrounds you. Feel the embrace of the massage seats that adapt to your every move. Experience the warmth of a vehicle that welcomes you as you approach. We could tell you what makes a Lincoln SUV so extraordinary, but don't take our word for it. Take it on a test drive at the Lincoln Summer Invitation, with exclusive offers on now, only at your local Lincoln retailer.
Brian, another story that grabbed some headlines this week was that RFK Jr. visited Idaho as the very first Trump official of this administration to come to our state. And he met with Governor Little. They had a very brief, I don't know if you can call it a press conference because they didn't take any questions, but they had a brief speech with pictures, a photo op, I guess. And they came and Governor Little declared that August 2025 will be Keep Idaho Healthy Month in honor of RFK's Make America Healthy Again. And so I know I have thoughts about it. And I know you've been involved with the Kohberger case a lot this week. But as a journalist, was this surprising to you? Surprising that they didn't allow questions? Or does this seem like kind of a press tour situation?
Oh, it was definitely. We talked about this. I mean, it was a 10-minute stand around and talk about things and then move on. And it was a 10-minute photo op. We got the press release or I should say, the media advisory that this was happening, I think the day before. And at the very bottom in italics, it says, no questions will be allowed.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, then what's the point?
Yeah.
And I said that in the newsroom. I said, okay, and our news director, well, we should probably still go. And I was like, why? Again, you're just there to just do a photo op, which is basically what it was. I haven't seen the proclamation, so I don't know exactly what it says. But I know that RFK Jr. said, because of all the things that Idaho has done, both during and since the pandemic, when it comes to medical freedom and also trying to make Idaho healthy again. And you referenced the soda and candy law, like if you're on food stamps or SNAP program, you are limited in what soda and candy you can buy. Those are the things he uses evidence as Governor Little and the state of Idaho making Idahoans healthy again.
Yes.
Did not mention Medicaid and those that would not be on that anymore. Or the ivermectin bill, didn't mention that either. But that's regard to the vaccines. The other medical freedom, he did mention that, meaning you don't have to have a vaccine to get a job in Idaho.
Yes. And RFK Jr. said that Idaho was, quote, the home of medical freedom. And so I would like to just add a little asterisk to that. Unless you have a uterus, unless you're transgender, unless your doctor wants to deny you medical treatment because of your lifestyle or who you are as a person, unless you want a mask mandate during a pandemic, or unless you want an appropriate level of vaccination for our elementary school kids. So I just think that needs a healthy asterisk. Home of medical freedom-ish is about the best we can do.
And I'll add to that, if you can't afford health care.
Yeah.
That's a big pool. I mean, that's included in that too. So yes, do what you want as long as you can afford it.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm worried about our ability to keep Idaho healthy since we have a 79% vaccination rate among children for the MMR vaccine, and measles is on the rise. And so, as a nurse, I just don't feel like we're very healthy if our kids have measles. Just nitpicky things like that. We actually have one of the lowest vaccination rates for elementary school kids, depending on the vaccine, in the entire country. So it did just feel kind of, it didn't feel like a press conference that was based in reality. It definitely felt like a pat each other on the back and ignore the major issues that Idahoans are facing. I did appreciate there was a protest.
Yes.
And in the news reports about this press, no, I'm not even going to call it a press conference, this photo op, you could hear the protesters chanting, "Vaccines save lives, Idahoans need Medicaid." There were a lot of chants that you could hear in this press release or in this photo op. So I appreciated Idahoans out there making their voice heard, even though journalists were not allowed to ask questions.
Right. And I don't know how many were in the room, but yeah, it was 10 minutes and there were more people, I believe, outside on the Capitol steps than attended this press briefing in the governor's office. So that tells you, I mean, there's still, you can have all the medical freedom you want, but if you're basing your medical decisions on misinformation or not enough information, then is that really freedom, I guess? Is that really kind of, are you given the choice to make the chance to make the right choice? So
yeah,
it's pretty interesting. And yeah, I think we have seen kind of a little bit of a turn when it comes to Governor Little, and he's become a little bit more leaning into the Trump arena and the Trump camp a little more than he did during the first administration.
Absolutely.
It's been very obvious. He's been in DC a few more times, and this RFK visit and any sort of thing he posts on social media, you can see it. It's pretty evident.
Well, and I think it's evident in Trump has been posting more about Idaho. I think in his first term, I don't really remember any tweets about Idaho, but there's been several praising Governor Little. He talked about the Kohberger case. He's brought up different things that are happening in Idaho. And so is that potentially what Governor Little is doing here? He cozies up to Trump and maybe gets a spotlight on Idaho issues or some recognition?
It's possible. I mean, I think he's kind of catering to that base a little bit because there is an election coming up for him and for governor. And so I think he's just trying to secure that a little bit. It is interesting that as that is ramped up, Trump has never stepped foot in the state of Idaho before, like ever. I believe he was the first president in a long time, going back to his first administration, that had not been to Idaho. So if that's his way of doing it now from a distance where, Governor Little will go visit him, but, it's not reciprocated, I guess that's the state that we're in right now.
Well, and now might not be the time with the Epstein files and everything happening to cozy up to President Trump. Like this might be the worst moment to try to be getting closer to President Trump.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have to watch who you hang out with or be in the vicinity of in that orbit, because there could be a lot of shrapnel that kind of comes off of that.
Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast, brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today, available now on all major podcast platforms.
Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant.
Whoa, that's refreshing.
And a 9.5 plus pH for every way you move.
I did take a spin class today.
Restoring like a pro. Smart Water Alkaline with antioxidant. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
This was a heavy week, so I wanted to end with a pick of the week that is more hopeful and maybe focused on some of the positive things happening around the state. It's really, really easy to see the hard things. But this weekend at the Capitol, there's not a protest, which there's been many very good and important protests. But this weekend at the Capitol, there's actually going to be Hands Around the Capitol 2025. And this is an event honoring the 35th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it's actually happening today from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Cecil D. Andrus Park, just right next to the Capitol. And there's going to be food trucks. There's going to be all kinds of booths, all kinds of different performances as just this moment of coming together as Idahoans to support everyone and to stand for equality and access to care and make sure that people know they do belong in these moments that feel really hard and feel really isolating. And they are also going to have sign language interpreters and Spanish translators to really help make sure everyone who wants to come will feel included and be able to be part of what is happening. And so I just wanted to give them a shout out. I love when Idahoans come together and stand up for our Idaho values of access and inclusion. So really excited about that pick of the week. What about you, Brian?
My pick of the week goes into next week, actually. Jaialdi is starting next Tuesday, I believe, and it is a festival. It actually means festival in Basque. It's a Basque festival, and that happens every 5 years, although it hasn't happened since 2015 because of the pandemic. They tried to postpone it, but it's been the first one since 2015, so it's going to be a big deal. And what I like about it is it really brings together the community, the diaspora of the Basque people. Boise is one of the largest per capita outside of the Basque country itself. And I was fortunate enough to go back to the Basque country back in 2015 to kind of highlight as a preview of the Jaialdi Festival of that year. And I learned so much about Boise's connection to the Basque country and why it's so important and how it lives on today. Like Guernica itself, the city of Guernica, the sister city, why we have a bar Guernica, the tree of Guernica that sits there in front of the Basque Museum. It's an amazing story. And if you get a chance to go down there, you can learn about it. I mean, there are plaques, but just talking to people, seeing the dances, the community of the Basque people is just so much fun. That's the diversity, again, of Idaho and how when you come together, you really get to see what it's about. We're going to be doing a live show down there with KTVB on Wednesday to kind of highlight that. I mean, there's anything. There's going to be sporting events, Basque boarding events. If you like to see some stuff you don't really see on a regular basis, come down, check it out. The dancing, the food, just the camaraderie, the bands that show up. And of course, they're also opening up that new park across the street from the Basque Center. So there's a lot going on next week, and it should be fun for everybody from Tuesday, I believe, through Saturday.
Yeah, and there's going to be free events. There's, like you said, the sporting events. I'm really excited about that. I think that sounds really, really fun. We've had a couple episodes talking to people about Jaialdi, about Basque culture, gearing up for the festival, and I think this is a really fun opportunity, another fun opportunity for Idahoans to come together, for people in Boise to come together and really celebrate the Basque members of our community and this Basque heritage that they bring and share with us. I love that pick. I'm very excited. You're doing a live show, but do you have any days or events that you're really excited for or planning on celebrating, not doing work?
So it'll be probably like Friday and Saturday. I just like hanging out. I just like being amongst it and watching it and seeing everybody just have a great time and how much, I'll be the first to say that, yes, the Basque block needs to expand for events like this because there's hardly room to move when everybody gets together. And with this Jaialdi, that means people from the Basque country are coming here.
Yeah.
And it just fills up even more. You'll hear languages, you'll hear words, you'll learn new things that you didn't know. And it's just a lot of fun. The sporting event is awesome. Watching big dudes and women pick up big stones, move things around, throw things, just some of these traditional sporting events that, that they've done for generations and centuries. It's fun to watch. And as you said, lately, with everything being so heavy, no better way to just let that all go and just have a calimocho and hang out on the Basque block.
Absolutely. See you there, Brian.
Yes.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, Elizabeth Kama, Selena C.A. Reynolds, and me, Lindsay Van Allen. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter, and our music is by Up Is the Down Is the and All the Kimonos. We wanted to take a moment and thank all of our listeners who voted for us as Boise Weekly's Best of Boise podcast. We won! We'll be back on Monday with another great local story. Catch you then.
Calimochos are gross, by the way.
Okay, I deeply love them. That's how I got through nursing school. Every Friday I got a calimocho.
But I bet you could only have one because after that you're like, that's flavor I don't want to do anymore.